This video will explore how to manipulate the Document Object Model, or DOM, using JavaScript. We will cover modern JavaScript approaches to interact with the structure of a web page. The key areas we will focus on are finding elements, creating new elements, modifying existing ones, removing elements, cloning elements, and exploring some practical patterns. Let's start with how to find elements within the DOM. JavaScript provides several methods for this purpose. The most commonly used method is querySelector, which allows you to select the first element that matches a specified CSS selector. To select all elements matching a selector, you would use querySelectorAll. There are also traditional methods like getElementById, which selects an element by its unique ID, and getElementsByClassName, which returns a live collection of elements with a specific class name. Here are some examples of how these methods are used in code. Using querySelector with the class name btn, we'll select the first button. querySelectorAll will select all input elements on the page. GetElementById with the ID main will select the element with that ID. Lastly, getElementsByClassName with the class name item will select all elements with that class. You can also use more complex CSS selectors like nav greater than ul first child to select a nested element. Now let's explore how to create new elements in the DOM. The primary method for creating a new HTML element is createElement. This method takes the tag name of the element you want to create as an argument. For example, calling document.createElement with the argument div will create a new div element. Similarly, document.createElement with the argument button will create a button. After creating an element, it must be added to the document using methods like appendChild. Another way to add elements using HTML strings involves the use of inner HTML or insert-adjacent HTML. Insert-adjacent HTML is generally considered safer and more flexible, as it does not overwrite existing content. For instance, you can insert a card element with a title and content using insert-adjacent HTML. Now let's delve into modifying existing elements. Modifying the content of an element is a fundamental task. Text content is the preferred method for updating text content because it safely preserves spaces. For example, using element.textContent and assigning it the value new text will modify the text content of the element. Inner HTML, on the other hand, allows you to update HTML content, but it should be used with caution due to potential security risks. For example, using element.innerHTML and assigning a span element will change the HTML content within the element. Modifying attributes is another essential part of DOM manipulation. To manage element attributes, you can use setAttribute and getAttribute. SetAttribute is used to set or modify attributes, and getAttribute retrieves the value of an attribute. For example, element.setAttribute with the arguments ID and newID will set the ID attribute of the element. Similarly, element.setAttribute with class and active will set the class attribute. Using element.getAttribute with ID will get the ID attribute of the element. In this part, we will continue to explore how to modify DOM elements, focusing on managing CSS classes and styles. The classless property provides a modern and convenient way to handle CSS classes. For example, you can add a class using the add method, remove it using the remove method, and toggle it using the toggle method. The contains method helps to check if a class exists on the element. Here are some examples. Element.classlist.add with active adds that class to the element. Element.classlist.remove with the argument hidden removes that class. Element.classlist.toggle with selected toggles that class. Lastly, element.classlist.contains with active returns a Boolean indicating if the class is present. Additionally, you can modify styles directly through the style property. This enables direct CSS manipulation. For example, you can set inline styles such as background color and padding. Additionally, You can assign multiple styles using object.assign to set properties like color, margin, and display all at once. Now let's explore how to remove elements from the DOM. An element can remove itself using the remove method. Alternatively, you can remove an element using the removeChild method on its parent. For example, element.remove will remove the element from the DOM. Similarly, element.parentNode.removeChild element will also remove the element from the DOM. The remove method isn't supported in older browsers, so using removeChild is recommended for wider support. To ensure safe removal, always check if an element exists and if it has a parent node. When removing child elements, you can remove all children by looping through each child using a while loop and using removeChild. Alternatively, setting innerHTML to an empty string is a faster way to remove all children. To remove specific children, you can select the target children using querySelectorAll and remove each of them. Remember that innerHTML removes event listeners attached to the element, and that removeChild preserves event listeners. In this section, we will discuss how to clone DOM elements. Cloning allows you to create exact copies of existing elements. There are two types of cloning, shallow and deep. A shallow clone creates a copy of the element without its children. Event listeners are not cloned in a shallow copy. This is done using the cloneNode method with the Boolean value of false. A shallow clone would be created using element.cloneNode with the argument false. After creating the shallow clone, it should be appended to the document. The attributes of the original element need to be manually copied to the clone using setAttribute. A deep clone, in contrast, creates a copy including all nested children using cloneNode with the Boolean value of true. A deep clone is created using element.cloneNode with the argument true. Also, you can further customize the clone by setting new attributes or datasets. To copy events recursively, you can write a custom function to add event listeners from the original element to the cloned element. Finally, let's examine some practical patterns for DOM manipulation. The first pattern we will look at is the use of document fragments. Use document fragments when performing batch DOM updates to improve performance by reducing reflows and repaints. Here is an example. A document fragment is created. Then, multiple elements are created and appended to the fragment, and finally the fragment is added to the DOM. This results in only a single reflow. The next important pattern is event delegation. Event delegation is a strategy for handling events more efficiently by attaching a single event listener to a parent element instead of many listeners on multiple child elements. This approach is especially useful when dealing with dynamic elements. Here is an example of event delegation. An event listener is added to the container. Inside, if the target is a button, then handleClick function is called, and if the target is inside a card, then handleCard is called. This makes it easy to manage events for dynamically created content. If you like this video, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Visit codelucky.com for more such useful content.